Um, but we can go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to Re.Use's Wednesday one-on-one webinar. We always do this on the first Wednesday of the month, and we try to focus on different sustainability related topics. And so this week we're going to be talking about introduction to energy efficient commercial buildings, featuring Ashley Sadowski. But before I pass it over to you, Ashley, I just wanted to share. Can you all see the Reuseful website right now? Okay. So just wanted to share a little bit about us. We work to keep waste out of the landfill by connecting still good stuff to charity partners. We also host repair cafes across the Kansas City metropolitan area. And we're working to really build our relationships. We're also doing some plastic film recycling to create public benches, that kind of thing. So there's different ways that you can get involved with us. We have our events calendar. You can see where we have our undumpster days, clothing swap coming up, repair cafe. We also have our computer repair cafe coming up. And we're always looking for volunteers too. Our shifts are pretty short. And we also always need folks, if you have a repair skill, it'd be great to have you. But yeah, so that is us, and I will now turn it over to you, Ashley.
All right. Since it's a small group, I thought maybe I'll introduce myself, but maybe we just go around really quickly and introduce ourselves. And if there's anything in particular you want me to cover, I'm happy to lean into that since we have a small group. So I'm Ashley Sadowski. I'm the Director of Building Energy Exchange, Kansas City. Emily, do you want to go next?
Sure. Apologies for no camera. My day shook out that way. So Emily Randall, I guess I'm owner of EJR Consulting and I'm contracting part-time with Climate Action KC as their managing director. I have a background in local government and work with Ashley closely with Climate Action KC and Building Energy Exchange's work. And I haven't ever heard Ashley's pitch. So I worked with Climate Action KC since April, and I just thought this would be an awesome time to just hear it from scratch as if I was, a new listener. And also, Climate Action KC is on a more serious note. Climate Action KC is working, all the time, meeting new people who need different things in different parts of the economy and such, and just being able to be really current on Ashley's talking points and able to share this information for the commercial space, I think will play well for us, for me to be able to be more versant in her work. So thanks.
Awesome. Angel, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Angel. I work in an architecture firm in Lincoln, Nebraska, actually. And I think I'm a member of our sustainability for our firm, Shemmer. We do projects kind of across the central, I guess, states from North Dakota to Texas, sort of Denver to Illinois at the moment, a few odds and ends outside of there. But I think I ran across this webinar and just being a part of the sustainability committee, just wanted to kind of look and see, what information it could do to help. And I'm definitely looking at wanting to incorporate ways that we can start recycling, in our drafting and things, and looking for opportunities that are available in different areas. So.
Very good. All right. Well, I will go ahead and share my screen. And again, since we're a small group, I don't mind being interrupted. So feel free to just chime in and say, hey, tell me more about this one section or whatever, because I'm going to try to cover a lot of different parts of the conversation. And so there's a lot of opportunity to go deeper on any of it. So feel free to interrupt me, or we can kind of return back to some things at the end of the conversation. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So as I said, I'm Ashley Sadowski. I'm the Director of Building Energy Exchange, Kansas City. We are an initiative of the Mid-America Regional Council and Climate Action KC. We were created as a part of the Regional Climate Action Plan that was developed back in 2021 that also included a greenhouse gas inventory that showed that 63% of our greenhouse gas emissions are from buildings. So that really sort of set the tone that we had to address the real estate sector. And Angel, I'll just also mention I'm an architect as well, so I kind of came at this from being a part of the design and construction space and then have now moved into this role. So the way that we work is we have sort of a public-private sector dichotomy in how we operate. So we serve everyone on the left, which are essentially building decision makers, everyone from the owners, tenants, lenders, AC industry, community leaders, because a lot of community leaders have a lot of influence on what happens in their neighborhoods. And then we partner with a lot of folks on the right, regional bodies like MARC, city governments, utilities, civic leaders, and other nonprofits. So we all work together collectively to try to address these emissions, knowing that a lot of them are in the hands of the people who work in the real estate space every day. So we also are part of a national partnership called the Building Performance Partnership. It's a collection of building energy hubs across the country who have a similar vision of zero barriers to net zero energy. So equipping the real estate industry with the tools, technical or financial tools necessary to address the emissions of their respective region and also transform the market to more high performance buildings. So we do that in a number of ways. We have technical primers on our website, which I'll talk more about later in the presentation. We have what's called the Rising Trades Contractor Accelerator Program. We just wrapped up 2 cohorts of that program, which helps connect diverse construction firms to the high performance buildings industry and help to grow their firm to meet that need. We do a lot of workshops, webinars like today, to really just get the word out about what's going on, what the opportunities are for people to move their projects forward. So far I've said the word net zero energy probably at least 2 or 3 times. So as it relates to buildings, I like to clarify how we use that word. There's a lot of conversation nationally. I think the Biden administration finally came out with a definition for what net zero means as it relates to buildings. I'll give it as sort of what I think sort of simplifies it into 3 parts. The first is use less, which is probably the most pertinent piece to this audience, because this really is focused on reusing what we have. So using our existing buildings, extending the life of those buildings as much as possible, right-sizing our spaces. We're seeing a lot of that in the office market right now. How can we right-size our spaces to be how people are truly working, reduce waste whenever possible, and when projects do need to happen, how can we use local durable materials, reuse materials, through deconstruction practices. So this is a big piece because that's all of the embodied carbon elements of the project are embedded in that component. The second is to be efficient. So this involves having a strong envelope, passive envelope that includes high quality windows. The envelope is sealed, strong wall and roof insulation, and then efficient HVAC systems. And then lastly, transitioning to electric wherever possible on those mechanical systems so that it can maximize the use of renewable power. And so once you get to the point where you've used as much of the building as possible, you've reused existing buildings, you're as efficient as you possibly can with the building envelope and the HVAC systems, then the remaining energy load, you think about offsetting. So you can offset through solar, through wind, through geothermal. There's a number of renewable options there, and those are growing in popularity every day. And then also carbon sequestration. How can you maximize your tree canopy, your green infrastructure on site to not only sequester carbon through the natural properties that happen in green infrastructure, but also lower the ambient temperature of the building site so that you are not requiring as much demand on the heating and cooling of the building. And then it turns out that these three very simple principles actually have a ton of co-benefits. So using less, obviously you're going to save on construction and operating costs, in that you're also going to preserve the historic charm of the building and the neighborhood by maintaining those existing buildings. When you're efficient, you lower the energy bills and you create more functional and comfortable spaces for the tenants. You can sit in the windowsill without being cold in the winter or too hot in the summer. And when you offset and you remove fossil fuel use and on-site combustion off of your site, you're actually creating healthier indoor air quality. You're increasing the natural beauty of the site, and you're increasing productivity. So all co-benefits that you could probably argue are worth doing on their own, but there's a really great symbiotic relationship. By reducing your carbon footprint, you end up with a lot of really great co-benefits. Okay, so now I'm going to touch on the how piece of this. So as we go on this path to net zero, and we're going to specifically focus on existing buildings because existing buildings are the biggest part of this footprint, the first step is to conduct an energy audit. So if you're looking at a project, you have a building that you either occupy or you have some influence on, doing an energy audit is a way of reviewing how the building is currently performing, what sort of tactics could improve its performance, and maybe how to roll out those projects. So the first part of an energy audit is what's called an ASHRAE level 1. So for any commercial building, and I'm speaking at the commercial scale, but there is a similar energy auditing process for a single family residential scale, but just speaking commercially, ASHRAE level 1 I would equate to getting a physical. So it's looking at the building in a very broad, comprehensive way, but not going too deep into any one category of or component of the building. So you're interviewing key personnel, and typically this is an engineering firm that would be doing this, interviewing key personnel, they're reviewing utility bills, they're walking through on site, and they'll identify any glaring signs of inefficiency. This all sets a baseline for the current performance. This is good for prioritizing building improvements across the portfolio. So I'll get into the ASHRAE level 2, which is where you're going to want to head. But if you're looking at a variety of buildings, let's say on a campus, you're likely to want to just do a number of ASHRAE level 1s across that campus to determine which buildings should be focused on first. Also, if you're thinking about pitching a project to decision makers, maybe you have a client that is trying to decide whether it's worth making these additional improvements. This is a good way to show that it's, the juice is worth the squeeze. You might be performing much lower than you are compared to peers, and that might be enough to trigger a decision to say, yes, let's go ahead and do an ASHRAE level 2 audit. Okay, so in ASHRAE level 2, this builds on the level 1 analysis with a more detailed energy calculation. The building personnel are going to continue to get interviewed, but in more depth. They're going to give insights that help to define those project goals. And the big piece of a level 2 is that there's a financial analysis. So it identifies the projects that will provide the greatest energy reduction and return on investment. And so you'll get a sense of how to prioritize those projects. This is the recommended level of a review. Most energy-related projects go up to an ASHRAE level 2. Some more complicated, larger projects will go to an ASHRAE level 3, but this is less common. So for all intents and purposes, most projects that are occurring would stick with a level 2. Okay, so this is helpful. In both Kansas and Missouri, there is an opportunity to get a free ASHRAE level 2 audit. So this is available through the University of Missouri, and it's through their Industrial Assessment Center that you can get a no-cost energy audit for industrial and commercial buildings. This program has been around for a while, specifically for industrial, but they have recently opened it up to commercial buildings, and that also includes nonprofits. So if you have a client or you're connected to someone who might need an energy audit, this is a very easy way to go. Don't have to burden them with the cost of that initial cost of the audit. Okay, so I'm going to touch on, with existing buildings, what are those building blocks that make up a retrofit project? What are the things that are likely to be mentioned in the audit? And I'll start with some of the low-hanging fruit. So lighting retrofits, up to 75% savings on lighting electricity costs by switching to LEDs. This is a no-brainer. Oftentimes projects that have very little budget. We've even seen projects that don't have any budget, and through the use of utility incentives have been able to replace all of their lighting to LED. You can receive up to 50% savings from controls, occupancy sensors, photo sensors. There's different ways that you can replace those fixtures, and all of which have a benefit in terms of greenhouse gas reduction and lowering energy costs, and oftentimes perform better in terms of the quality of light and improve the tenant experience. And they're low maintenance. Oftentimes they last several years compared to an incandescent, so you're not getting up on a ladder and replacing nearly as frequently. Weather sealing. So this is oftentimes discovered through the use of an infrared camera. You're looking for holes, cracks, seams in the roof and the building envelope. Oftentimes it occurs where pipes or pipe penetrations didn't get sealed properly, and ductwork didn't get sealed properly as it passed through the building envelope. So you're going to want to seal air leaks in doors, windows, or any other penetrations as well. Oftentimes you can have some pretty low-hanging fruit there as well that you didn't realize there was an issue, and that can change with very little cost. You can change the performance of the building. High performance roof insulation. This is a bit more of an intensive project. Oftentimes this is best suited for when you're already in a position to replace the roof. So you're going to upgrade the roof to a higher level of insulation. Obviously there's some considerations there with adjusting the flashing and other things with the roof assembly. Definitely want to work with an architect to determine how to detail that. And wherever possible to create a cool roof with a light coating, whether you're doing a full roof replacement or not, that's going to help with solar heat gain in the warmer months. Wall insulation, similar to roof insulation, this is an important piece to improving the performance. That it's a piece that can be added either to the exterior or interior surface, depending on what you're doing. As you think through projects that might be wanting to reclad the building, maybe it's an older building that has kind of an outdated facade, that's a really great opportunity to put in a high performance panel. This is an example from Rockwool, which where they create sort of a clip system that installs the insulation with that panel. So now you have a brand new facade, and you also have super insulated building as a part of that. High performance windows. Your sort of three major factors to look for in that: the U factor. The lower the U factor, the better it's performing. Solar heat gain coefficient. That depends on the orientation of the building, and will depend on how much solar heat you want to come into the building or not come into the building. And then obviously air leakage, you want to be as minimal as possible. So a lot of the information I just shared came out of our technical primers. We have these 4-pagers that talk about a variety of different systems for retrofits, both HVAC and building envelope. I put a little QR code here if you want to go to our website and just check those out. This is a great thing when you have a building decision maker. You may have a building owner or a client that's looking to better understand what these different technologies are and maybe what the cost benefit is. This is a good way to start the conversation. Okay, and I'm just going to end talking a little bit about the federal funding opportunities that are helping us get further faster on these building upgrades. And I'm just going to touch on this very high level. And if there's any questions or anybody wants to go into more depth, I'm happy to do that because this can be a bit overwhelming. But what I will say is that between the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill, there was over $30 billion that was specifically dedicated to building efficiency and decarbonization, with an additional $57 billion that could support building work. And a lot of this is estimated. So you'll see, particularly on the things that are related to tax credits, they'll have a plus at the end of the estimate because a lot of those are uncapped. So we could be seeing significantly more investment than what's even sort of estimated here, depending on how many people use those incentives. So just to give you an example, I took multifamily as an example of where you find these sort of green layers to the capital stack, things that could improve the ability to pay for high performance features within a multifamily building. The first is tax incentives. So with multifamily housing, we're seeing 45L, which is an energy efficient home tax credit. It goes in two pathways. One is Energy Star rated and the other is Zero Energy Ready homes. And they have varying levels of credits based on that performance and also based on some prevailing wage elements to it. The Solar Investment Tax Credit, ITC, this is one of the more lucrative of all the tax credits. This piece can cover up to 30% of your project cost for solar, but there's additional adders to that that can get you up to 70% of your project cost. So definitely worth looking into solar in every project and investigating how you can maximize that tax credit because it's unprecedented level of incentive for that. At the same time, we're looking at solar costs going down. So between those two things, there's a lot of incentive for people to do solar. So green financing, here's a few examples of where green financing is playing out. And just to kind of give you a sense of what green financing means, historically in some of the more coastal markets, they've had things called green banks for some time. And that is funding that allows you to invest in sustainable technologies at lower cost so that it creates more parity in the marketplace between projects that are sort of built to code versus projects that are much more higher performing, that you can have the same cost of capital. So it incentivizes building owners to build better. So that's been existing for some time in coastal markets, and now it's having more of a national footprint as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. So $27 billion was allocated through the EPA to a number of financial institutions who will be rolling out green financing tools across the country. One of the first was the Solar for All program, which the state of Missouri received $156 million of that. That goes specifically to low-income solar. The second was $14 billion through the National Clean Investment Fund and $6 billion through the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. And then, as I will mention, PACE financing has existed in Missouri for many years now, I think since 2014, but it's also a great tool for financing projects. And then energy rebates. Evergy has had utility rebates for the past 10 years in Missouri. As of this year, they now have rebates in Kansas. So that's something that should be leveraged. That's easy money, and they have a lot of technical support to make sure you maximize it. Home energy rebates will soon be available for single family and multifamily. We're anxiously awaiting for the states of Kansas and Missouri to launch their programs. That should say late 2025, hopefully not 2026, but they keep being delayed. So we're likely to see them roll out in 2025. And then grants, those fluctuate depending on application periods. So I didn't list those out specifically, but we I've been working with the Mid-America Regional Council to try to maximize the amount of grants we can get for the region. We're currently looking at funding 25 to 30 nonprofits to do energy efficiency work from a recent DOE grant. We've looked at a number of other grant opportunities for housing, for schools, for other building types. Unfortunately, those have not been successful, but we will keep trying on that front. Okay, so I'm going to end by just kind of a next step here. So we established what's called the BXKC's community classroom, and you're welcome to sign up for this. You're able to learn alongside other community developers who are working to incorporate high performance building measures into their projects. It's an eclectic group of folks who come together to try to understand how do we make sense of all of these different funding opportunities, these different technologies, and we can learn from each other. So, and then lastly, my email here, if you just want to chat about a specific project that you're working on, I'm happy to put together some resources that reflect what could be leveraged in that project. And Angel, though I'm a little less knowledgeable about Nebraska, I do know a lot of the federal incentives that I mentioned would be covered there. So there's a lot of things I could suggest to you. I'm going to stop share. See all of you.
Awesome.
All right. And now I just open it up for questions, and happy to go back to anything that was mentioned that you'd like me to talk more on.
I know I can start off if you'd like. I'm just kind of curious. I know things are still rolling out, but are you seeing developers utilizing these opportunities effectively in the Kansas City area? I guess, how are you tracking that if they are?
Yeah, at this point, we're still pretty early, which feels crazy because the IRA has been out for 2 years, but unfortunately, it just takes a long time to get some of these programs off the ground, the IRS to give guidance on how they're going to work. We're kind of getting there, though we're still waiting on some programs like the rebates. The green financing piece is still rolling out, so we're waiting to see what those tools are. But one of the things we're focused on at the moment is the tax incentives, because for the most part, that's ready to go. It's non-competitive as long as you meet the requirements and provide the correct documentation, it's yours. So, you know, there's so much opportunity there that we want people to take advantage of, especially in places like Kansas City, Missouri has a 2021 code. So any project that goes through there is eligible for any of those incentives. So it's just money that could be left on the table otherwise. One of the things that I've been working on is to focus on specific what's called lighthouse projects. So the folks that are establishing these green financing tools are looking across the national marketplace and are trying to find what are projects that really stick out as being like scalable projects that have a significant amount of impact, a significant amount of GHG reduction, and could potentially be an exemplary project, not just for the fund, but also for that region. So I've had a few projects here locally that are looking at getting a multifamily and affordable housing project that's looking at the Zero Ready Homes program and incorporating those features, incorporating solar, a number of other things, and using that as an example of, okay, how can we use this as something that as it develops over the next year or so, people could learn from and replicate. Sometimes I think the easiest way to get people to be attentive to this kind of financing and funding is to just show them a project that's happening in Kansas City and hear from those people and understand how to do it. So we're trying to get a few early adopters out there so that everyone else can look and feel and touch and go on a site visit and understand what happened in that project and what worked and what didn't, and then get them more comfortable in doing it on their own projects. questions.
Any other questions, Emily or Angel?
I don't think so. It's true. I've heard you say, Ashley, that, like we're in different phases as we go through. And I mean, it'll be so interesting to see how it all plays out. I guess, and I mean, I think the info sheets highlighted at the beginning were really good and just like getting people's minds open. And then I just keep thinking about everybody's like first phone calls to getting their audits going, and then once you're in it, but there's the steps of getting people to actually take that first step. But, and also new projects
Yeah.
versus existing, that difference feels like a totally different community of people. Like, if you're in
Yeah,
this,
that's a good point. I mean, historically, I feel like there's been USGBC is a good example of a community that's done really well at bringing like new construction along and making it, particularly for a lot of bigger and institutional clients, its LEED just becomes the standard. So that's great. And in a lot of ways, technologies have met that aspiration in some ways for new construction. But retrofits, man, there's so many things that need to be done in the retrofit space that we're trying to get technology to catch up. Like, what's the most prefabricated way that you can replace a building envelope, to be more passive house, for example? And that's starting to blossom because there is some R&D funding that's kind of in that space right now. But, definitely coming up with a system that works more efficiently on the labor side is going to be really important.
Can you elaborate on that piece, just on the labor side, just like what you said?
Yeah. Well, so from a building envelope standpoint, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of how can you create a means and methods for constructing a building or constructing a new envelope system that is easy to install. That's probably the furthest behind because a lot of audits lean heavily on HVAC systems as being a major improvement. Unfortunately, though, HVAC systems have a lifespan, less than 20 years. So you're going to be back at it every 15 to 20 years. Whereas building envelope, you could basically make an improvement that lasts for the next 100 years. And so HVAC, technicians, all of that is super important. And there does need to be more education in that front, does need to be more training in general in that industry, specifically around being able to electrify those systems, demystifying heat pumps, all of that. But we also need to make sure we're thinking about how the building envelope could be improved at the same time as just sort of lagging in that space. So yeah.
Thanks.
I'm kind of curious, have you, when you were mentioning retrofits, is there a conversation around retrofitting of, like, say, historically registered buildings and kind of how that would work? Because, they can have really wonky requirements, but it's also another great tax incentive for the most part. So.
Yeah. So in my previous life as an architect, I worked on historic tax credit projects. Those are super important because they, a lot of Kansas City's downtown and urban core has been saved based on those HTCs. So I always am advocating for that. But it does come with some complications in terms of like, what can you do for the window treatment? A lot of times you aren't able to do triple pane windows in a historic building. So that's a challenge because you're trying to preserve that building and help it perform for the next 100, 200 years. And, it has good bones, but like, how can you make sure it's going to perform to what the new standards are? So I know there has been some conversations between SHPO that runs the historic requirements, as well as just practitioners who are in the field, like understanding how they can work through those restrictions. But it's definitely an issue, and it's going to become even more an issue over time. There has been, just going back to like this sort of R&D space of how you improve a building's efficiency without requiring as much as triple pane windows are great, wouldn't it be great to keep the existing windows and be able to provide some level of energy performance, either through an additional window that's provided on the backside, which is oftentimes what happens, or there's some technologies that are coming out around film that basically gets applied, especially in these big glass buildings, that film could be applied to the existing windows. And so you're not taking out every single unit of glass, but you're actually just applying something to it to perform better and last longer. So that definitely reduces the embodied carbon of taking those windows out and putting in new.
Yeah, I know we've gotten a couple applications for solar on in some of our historic districts. I'll have to see what the outcome of those were too, because I know that can also be challenging depending on the typology of the house.
Yeah. Yeah, solar is also a challenge, depending on, especially if you're looking at like a housing application where it's on a gable roof and you're trying to keep the integrity. I think that can be challenging. I think that one of the things that we could do better at in Kansas and Missouri is making it easier to have community solar, so that in applications, whether it's historic, whether it's tree coverage, whether it's I just don't want something on my roof or my roof is not solar ready, that we create a space for additional community solar that can be aggregated between neighborhoods. So that's definitely something that would make it much easier and much faster to get solar in all of our historic areas.
Any last minute questions from the group?
None from me. Thanks, Ashley.
Cool. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Ashley, for being here and sharing your knowledge. I will post the recording on the Re.Useful website. You can see all of our past webinars there, and if you want to, share that out. Are you able to share the presentation as well?
Yeah, I'll send it to you right after this so you can have a copy.
All right, well, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.